Hey class, Dr. Robinson here with American and Texas Government. And in this lecture video, what I want to talk about is the concept of constitutionalism. When you think about a constitution, you probably think about a collection of documents or a document that expresses how a government is going to be organized, right? But a constitution is a little bit more complex than that. What it is really doing is articulating or expressing how a society views its own way of life. Alright, so when we're thinking about the concept of a constitution, I want you guys to think of it in both of these aspects. And one of the main purposes of this course is so you can get a firm grasp for both of these aspects when it comes to both the American and Texas constitutions. One way that it might be productive for us to begin thinking about this distinction between a collection of documents or a document versus articulating the essence of a people or what a people's way of life is meant to be is through this distinction that Montesquieu develops between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And a really good example of this might just be a very simple law like a speed limit, right? The letter of the law is the written letter of the law, right? So in this simple example, the speed limit is 45. The letter is thou shalt not drive faster than 45 miles per hour, right? Now, and this is one that's kind of important to understand here. The spirit of the law is a little bit different. What is the purpose or the reason why we have that law? What are we trying to say when we put up a bunch of signs with speed limits on them and then have our police enforce them? What we're trying to say is that we want our society to be safe. This is one of the things that's important to us as a society, right? So the spirit of the speed limit law is for safety. And if you get into it and think about it, the notion of interpreting the meaning of a law or a constitution creeps up in everyday life, and this is a pretty good example, right? Because if a police officer were to pull you over driving, say, 47 in a 45, it's fairly common human reaction. Oh man, I can't believe he's pulling me over for doing a mere 2 miles an hour over the speed limit. The discrepancy is an interpretive one, right? Hopefully your train of thought is, at 47 and a 45, I'm still abiding by the spirit of the law. I was operating my vehicle in a safe manner, etc., right? And perhaps that one of the things that the police officer might be focusing on is executing the letter of the law, right? So when we debate our Constitution, something like the Second Amendment, it's there to protect us from government tyranny. One of the things that we debate about today is, do we still need it? Is the Second Amendment consistent with the spirit of the Second Amendment, keeping us safe and protecting us from tyranny, right? So these two aspects of Constitution, the letter and the spirit of the law, are both really important, and we'll be talking about both of them in this course. So what I want to begin this unit of the course on is talking about different types of constitutions, so we can see where America fits in the greater scheme of things, right? So the one good way of getting at this is through the early political scientists, and we'll look at both Plato and Aristotle. And as you see here, Plato's anthropological principle is very simply that the polis, or the Greek city-state, the political entity that he could study, is man writ large, or in other words, the society is a reflection of the folks who make up and live in that society. The city or the nation will be behaving in the same way, writ large, as the individuals who make up that city, right? So one way to think about a constitution of a society is to think of it as a reflection of the souls and the types of individuals who are living in that society. And when you think about it from this term, from this perspective, we get a typology that looks a little bit like this. So we can begin with something like an aristocracy, right? And Plato will depict this as a cycle of decline, okay? So we'll begin here with an aristocracy, and we'll see how over time, even a city made up of the best individuals, which is what we have here. Aristo is the Greek root best, Crossi, ruled by the best. So we don't mean the rich here. We mean those who are preeminent in virtue, who are wise, who are intelligent, who are respectable. Surely you know some old man or woman like this in your life, right? But the train of thought here is that as his son or grandson is coming up, he's going to be affected by others in society. We call these social forces, right? You don't just look up to your grandpa, but you're influenced by your friends and the TV and all of this other stuff, right? So one of the trains of thoughts here is that the son of this aristocrat will have some truly virtuous influences, but he's also going to be affected by others in a society who might be saying, you should go out and chase money and get rich, right? Perhaps his mother is affected by the fact that and this is sort of how Plato depicts it. But what if your friends, the young man, he's running around with other kids, and their fathers are wealthy, right? And so the mother grumbles that we don't have as much money, and this kid's going to grow up with that sort of tick in his head, right? Or perhaps the case is going to be, your father's friends are all famous. They've made a name for themselves. Perhaps he'll grow up with that tick. And if you have a society that is disposed to honors as opposed to virtue, you would call that a timocracy, and you see that on your screen here, right? So an honor-loving society as opposed to a society that loves to do the best, right? And that's a subtly different society. The results may be fairly similar between a timocracy and an aristocracy, but there's a difference. It may be subtle between an individual who wants to do the right thing and an individual who wants to be rewarded for doing the right thing, right? And of course, you can see how this devolution might occur here. Perhaps the son of the honorific, the guy who wins the awards, he's being influenced by the notion of pursuing money instead of honors, and that's how an oligarchy comes about. Right, a city that's made up of chasing money and getting rich, and you start to get this division between rich and poor, right? Another type of city, one which might evolve out of an oligarchy, is a democracy. And as the notes on the slide here note, Plato saw this as the most beautiful of constitutions because it had every type of human being would be in a democracy, right? One who just wishes to pursue pleasures, one who wishes to pursue money and honors and virtue. You can find all types of lifestyles in a democracy. What might arise out of this sort of confusion of what goal our city should be pursuing is tyranny, right? In other words, out of this disoriented, disrupted social order, somebody is going to come in and institute law and order, and it's going to be his law and order. And one of the funny things about tyranny is that the tyrant, instead of ruling the city like a virtuous aristocrat to do the best thing for everyone, he has this sort of, his tick now, instead of for honor or for money, is for power and for rule. And he'll do whatever it takes to maintain that. And Plato depicts the tyrant as using up all of his resources and then killing his family so that he can use his father's resources, right? So now we're talking about the type of individual ruling a city who would commit patricide or kill his own father in order to take over, right? So you see there are a variety of constitutions depicted here from that man who will pursue virtue to honors to money to pleasure to power, right? These are different types of individuals, and different types of societies are reflected when they're filled up by these types of individuals. And here you see, I won't leave this up long, pause it if you need to, but here's a nice sort of neat organizational chart here for you. Now, Plato's student Aristotle gives us another really interesting way of looking at the different types of constitutions or cities that might exist. Plato was, you might notice there, a little bit more of a philosopher. Aristotle was more of a scientist, and you see this here. He gives us a nice, neat chart with categories, right? Who rules? One, few, or many, right? They can rule, these groups could be ruling for the interest of the city or for self-interest. If one person is ruling for the interest of the city, we'll call that person a king or a monarch. If it's for self-interest, it's a tyrant. If few people are ruling for the best interest of the city, we'll call it an aristocracy. For self-interest, an oligarchy. And look, we're encountering words that we encountered with Plato, but they're being used subtly different. Although it's important to think about definitions in this course, it's probably a little bit more important to think about what's beneath this definition? If you can understand that when Aristotle says few people ruling for self-interest is an oligarchy, and when Plato says that a city in pursuit of wealth is an oligarchy, there's a similar definition underneath those two different ones, right? One of the main purposes of any college education is to be able to contemplate definitions and think about what they're saying, okay? So do that with these definitions here as well. When many rule the city for the interest of the city, he'll call this a polity, and for their own self-interest, he will call this a democracy, okay? Now, one of the things that both thinkers are depicting and are encouraging you to notice is that human nature is fallible. We are prone to make errors. We are prone to be self-interested. Right, so, or if to think about this in the Christian context of, the fallen human man, we're built in the image of God, but fallen, and therefore we sin. This is part of human nature, right? So one of the questions here that Aristotle and Plato ask is, what is the best regime? Which one of these constitutions is the best? If you think about it simply, the answer is kingship or aristocracy, for the obvious reason that they're wise, so they're going to make wise laws that are going to be best for the city. But if you think what's the best possible, given that human nature is fallible, the danger on the other side of the coin is that the king becomes a tyrant, the aristocrat an oligarch, or a good democrat becomes a selfish democrat. So for Aristotle, the best possible regime is one which prevents these degenerations, right? So how can you prevent aristocracy from degenerating into oligarchy, from polity into democracy? The answer lies in the self-interest of the parties. And by the way, your Federalist reading will be playing on the same notion, right? He'll say the creditors and the debtors need to be checked against one another. Hamilton will. Here, Madison in Federalist 10 that you've been assigned. Here you see a similar notion, right? The oligarchs are few people ruling for money. Democrats are many ruling for pleasure. Maybe the correct answer here is a mixed regime, because the oligarchs are self-interested and the Democrats are self-interested, so you can allow those self-interests to work against one another and to balance against one another, right? So a mixed regime, one which combines aspects of aristocracy and aspects of polity, is going to be the correct answer for what's the best regime, at least for the classical thinkers, Plato and Aristotle, because it's also the safest regime, taking into account humanity's fallen or fallible nature. Okay, and if we extend this one step further, because this is, of course, on American and Texas government, this is the train of thought that the American founders are relying upon when building the American and Texas governments as well. One quick way of getting into this, although your reading assignments and supplementary lectures and videos are going to do a good job for this first unit of, I think, building this point, perhaps what we see here is the American president is representing something like the kingship, the Senate representing something like the aristocracy, and the House of Representatives representing something like the democratic elements of our society, right? So by separating the powers and checking and balancing the powers, we are trying to facilitate this really classical notion that, again, this may show up on your test, humanity is fallible, we're prone to make selfish errors, and for that reason, the very best regime isn't the one which could theoretically produce the very best results, aristocracy or kingship, but a mixed regime which protects us. Okay, okay, that's all for now. Hopefully you've got a better sense for what a constitution is and what constitutions represent as we proceed in this course and look at various aspects of Congress and the presidency, and you debate what their roles ought to be. One of the things that you're debating and thinking about is, what should our society actually represent? What ideals should we pursue as a group of people? Okay. All right. So good luck with your readings in Unit 1, and I'll see you soon with my next lecture video.